Okay. Hello and welcome everybody. This is episode 2 of our In Conversation video podcast series in relation to LSBU AHP BAME Academics, discussing topics that may be of interest for all allied health professions. Today we are going to discuss with LSBU AHP course leaders what does allyship mean to them and how is it actively applied and demonstrated by them. Before we start our conversation, I just want to provide some background context to allyship from some authors. Anne Bishop, a well-known anti-racism trainer and author of Becoming an Ally, Breaking the Cycle of Oppression, the notable Professor Gus John, an education campaigner, and Malcolm Cumberbatch, an African-centered philosopher. Both Professor John and Malcolm Cumberbatch are UK-based, and Anne Bishop is from Nova Scotia. They all agree that allyship is not a passive token of goodwill, not a bystander activity, but that allyship journey starts with the person being open and declaring they have been part of the cycle of oppression of people whose heritage are from the global majority, whether it be unknowingly or not. And active allyship is taking just and equitable actions that are carried out irrespective of the people from the global majority populations. For example, speaking up and challenging racism and institutional racism because it is the right thing to do, not because it is directed at a person of colour. So that's the background to allyship. Thank you all for giving us your time. I know you're all busy, and but I'm glad we can start the conversation. But before we do carry on, could you please say your name and the course you are leader of, if that's all right? What I'll do is I'll just go with who's on my panel first, and then we'll just go round. So if I start with you, Paul.
Good afternoon, Mish. My name is Paul Sugarhood. I'm an occupational therapist and I'm the head of division of occupational therapy at London South Bank University.
And next is Gail.
Hello, my name is Gail Edwards. I'm a diagnostic radiographer and I'm the head of division for radiography and ODP at London South Bank University.
Thank you, Gail. And Claire?
Hi, my name is Clare Deary. I'm a physiotherapist and I'm head of division for physiotherapy, sport rehabilitation and chiropractic at London South Bank University.
Thank you, Claire. And Rachel?
Hello, everyone. My name's Rachel Picton and I'm the Deputy Dean for all of the above. So I'm a diagnostic radiographer by background, but Deputy Dean for the Department of Allied Health, Community Care and Advanced Practice, which involves many of our allied health courses, social work and advanced practices that covers both nursing and allied health.
Oh, lots going on there. And Anita?
Hi everyone, I'm trying to keep quiet during this, but you all know I'm an occupational therapist by background and I go across the school delivering interprofessional working and I'm really looking forward to today's conversation.
Thank you, Anita. I should have said at the beginning that Anita is my co-host today, so she's helping me with the hosting today. You're all very welcome, and I'm glad we can start having this conversation. So I'll start with my first question, if that's okay. What does allyship mean to you? So if I can start with Rachel, if that's all right.
Yeah, I knew you were going to do that, Mish. I can be the starter. So what does it mean to me? I think it means it's got a growing meaning. I think if I'm really honest, I think I was probably unaware of what it needed to mean to me, probably several years ago, but a growing awareness certainly in these last few months of the fact that it needs to not only mean something to me, but it needs to become part of the fabric of who I am, because we are in a wide society, certainly that is represented at the university at LSBU, but also just generally in life, that we have to have equality. We recognise it in many areas of life, certainly for disability and other areas, but for race, there are issues. There are issues of inequality, and that's not something that fits comfortably with me. But I wasn't aware of how deep or how wide or how far-reaching those issues were until recently. And so although having a cerebral awareness, it's now become part of my fabric, my muscles and my bones, that I need to be aware of the fact that there has to be equality. We'll go on to how we might do that. I know in some of our other questions we might answer, but that's what it means to me. It's going to have to be the core of my being going forward.
Thank you, Rachel. That was quite powerful to listen to, that there's been, for you, a realization and a growth there as well. And that whole thing that it's not just an external thing, it has to be an internalized thing. Thank you for that. Gail.
Okay, so I think allyship's really important because, you know, racism happens all around us every day. It's often not conscious, you know, and it's not obvious. So I think that it's just, you know, we need to be addressing it. We need to be aware in our day-to-day lives, you know, through, you know, kind of our workplaces, through our personal lives, in everything that we do, you know, to make it more noticeable, to kind of call it out when it occurs, and to stop these things before they reach an extreme, which is where they become more obvious and more noticeable and more challenged. So, you know, as Rachel said, I think it's much more of an internal thing that we need to kind of be looking at and addressing, and make it part of our living and our breathing and our day-to-day lives, in order to make sure that there is, you know, kind of equality across the piece. There is a systemic inequity that does need to be addressed, you know, both within education and all walks of life. And so we need to be consciously addressing that, making that part of everything that we think and everything that we do, you know, and living it and breathing it.
Thank you, Gail. That you make that important point, that it has to be a conscious action, and have to engage with it actively. So that is a point that really came through in what you said just now. Thank you very much. Claire, over to you.
Yeah, so I've had a bit of an epiphany this week, because I attended as regards allyship, because I really thought I was quite a good ally, and I genuinely believed that, and I realised this week that I've not actually been a very good one, and I've not been doing the right things in the right way. So I attended this, I think it was a podcast where Professor Gus John was there, and Malcolm Cumberbatch, and there was a woman for whom my eternal shame, I can't remember her name, because I wasn't, she was first on, and it wasn't until it became more and more into the podcast that I was becoming more and more realising this really does apply to me. So I didn't actually write her name down, but I did make a note of the book by Anne Bishop. And so I think that Professor John was saying things like he would go to meetings and he would address the meeting with something that affected him. And he would go and then have a cup of coffee, or it might have been him, he might have had colleagues that did this. He'd go and have a cup of coffee, and people would come up to him afterwards and say, I really agreed with you there, but they hadn't said anything in the meeting. And it's, you might think that you're doing the right thing, and you might think that you haven't, excuse me, my dogs are in the background joining in, but you think that you're doing something or you think you're being proactive, but actually you're not. And I really felt that really strongly. I found that quite a profound podcast to attend, actually. And I really learned a lot from that, about not just being a passive ally, actually being a proactive person and do something, you know, and not necessarily go out on the streets and placard, but actually in the workplace do the small things that are going to make a difference to those people around you. So I did have a bit of an epiphany, and I've realized that I wasn't actually the ally I thought I was. And I remember contacting Rachel saying, I've just been to this podcast, not knowing she was on the same one, and said, this has really had a profound effect on me. And it really has. So, so what I'm going to do now to develop my own allyship is I'm going to read more. I've ordered that book by Anne Bishop. I'm going to read and hopefully understand that a bit more. And I think unless you've had somebody's lived experience, you can't be an ally, you know, or rather you can't be an ally in the way that is needed if you make assumptions about somebody else's lived experience, you know. So for me, allyship is now for me being a bit more proactive and a bit more interesting and finding out a bit more about it, where I thought I'd come from a position where I was an ally and I haven't been as proactive as I need to be. So it means something quite different to me this week than it did last week, actually.
Thank you, Claire. Yes, I think it seems like a lot of us went to that
session. Yeah, it was very powerful.
It was Dr. Marie Charles was the lady who was right at the beginning. But yes, yeah, even I think, you know, I was saying this to Rachel and Nita the other day. We're all good people trying to do good things, right? And we think we are doing good things till someone says we're not, and then that's when we start to think about it and think, oh yeah, maybe I could have done this and I could have done that, and then think, well, next time I will. So that's the journey, isn't it? That's what we need to do, and need to do it actively and explicitly so that people can see it. So thank you for that, and thank you for your honesty, Claire. That's really good to share and show, because we need to hear that. All of us need to hear that. And actually, you've taken over into my next question, but I'll let you off.
All right.
Paul, the same question to you. What does allyship mean to you?
Yes, I think as with the other people here, I think I've had a lot of learning in the last 6 months. I remember I started working in NHS about 25 years ago, and I remember attending equality and diversity training since then. And one of the things that struck me a long time ago was that somebody in one of those sessions said that we are working towards equality and equity. And then it made me think, well, that means two things. One, things are not equal. And second, it's working towards. We've got to take an active approach. And that always stuck with me. But I think one of the things that I've really learnt more recently, or has become more powerful to me, is actually the first one of those, things not being equal, and it's accepting that the existence of racism. It's on the big scale, it's on the small scale, it's explicit, it's implicit, it is, things are not equal. And it's, for allyship for me, is the first step really, which I thought I'd taken previously, but it's become stronger to me more recently, is actually accepting that the privilege and white privilege exists, and that I'm part of that. I was somewhere, I can't remember where I was, but somebody used the metaphor of being in a queue, and certain characteristics, for example, race, will put you ahead of the queue. I mean, we've all been in queues recently outside the supermarket due to COVID-19, and I've realised that I, for various reasons, am towards the front of that queue automatically through race. So I think more recently I've accepted and realised, just by being a part of that queue, I am perpetuating in some ways the inequalities that exist. So it's about understanding that, and then the question is, well, what do you do? And I think for me, the allyship is two things. There's the inner work about reflecting, understanding, reading, learning. It's an opportunity to grow and learn about yourself. And then there's the more sort of the outer work in the professional role, particularly around how can you change things for the better, and what I do in my job, in my role.
Thank you, Paul. And yeah, there's so many things in there that I kind of relate to in some respects, because I think it's complex, and if you compare America and UK, it's very different what's going on. And because we have empire, we have race and class, we have lots of intersectionality with that. I mean, I say this quite a lot, in that, you know, I've been complicit in some of the things that have gone on because I'm in a privileged position, but I also haven't spoken up and because I just wanted a quiet life and I wanted to be invisible. So, there's a lot of nuance and complexity that is around this as well. And we have to talk about it, but then we have to act as well. We can't just keep talking about it as well. So I'm coming up to my next question. And the question is, has it been challenging, or what has been challenging about being an ally? And Gail, I might start with you there. And Anita, after this question, I might come to you for any thoughts you have while you've been listening as well. So Gail, over to you.
Yeah, I'd say that allyship has definitely been very challenging, particularly around, kind of the workplace with our student body and with our staff. If I look around what's the now virtual office, and the teams that I work within, they're not representative of our overall student bodies. They're not representative of the wider department or divisions, or even the wider university. And they're not representative of the clinical departments that we link with, that our students are going on to placement to, and they're qualifying to go and work within. So it's about recognising, I think, some of the challenges are recognising what these challenges are, and then how we can work to, kind of unpick the problems and to, try and make sure that our students are in a position that they can be themselves, they can reach their potentials, they can progress and feel comfortable and be who they are whilst they're doing that. Racism is all around us, white privilege is all around us. Without action, nothing's going to change. And so it's finding what those actions are. It's about working consciously to make sure that our students get those opportunities, that we address issues, and that we are actively living and demonstrating kind of what we speak about, rather than waiting for someone else to do it. I mean, as you said before, it's there's always a temptation to kind of sit back quietly and kind of be the invisible person. But the challenge is to not be that invisible person, and to be the one that steps up and try to make sure that you're addressing kind of things as they occur, and that you're making sure that the people around you feel comfortable and safe, and that they have exactly the same opportunities as everybody else, and try and kind of pull down the barriers to the inequality that is all around us. So yeah, I'd say it's very, very challenging, but it's about actively working on that, looking at kind of what privileges we have, and trying to break down that external and make sure that everybody has the same opportunities as everybody else. There shouldn't be someone at the front of the queue all of the time. Everybody should have that same kind of opportunity. So we need to actively work to make sure that we give everybody that same opportunity.
Wow, thank you, Gail. Thank you for that. I can hear the sort of frustrations about being in this virtual world as well from you, and trying to get involved with allyship from that platform as well. But hopefully this podcast is another way of kind of accessing allyship and sharing what's good about being an ally and being active in being an ally as well. Rachel.
Okay. The challenges. I think, like Gail, for me, like Gail has said, I think that there is just so much to be done. And sometimes when we're in that position, we get overwhelmed then with what we can and can't do. I think me personally, like I said, I've been on this journey for a little while now. We are now a family of colour. I have a mixed race grandson. And so for the last 7 years, I have been seeing the world slightly differently, but never had that personal experience. But we now have a family-wide experience. And so as I've grown in this journey, I have been not aware of the fact of my white privilege. I didn't understand that until very recently. I understood about equality and diversity and the importance of it, but I didn't see it through the lens of my white privilege. And I think once that light bulb goes on, it then opens up this other cavern of information that you don't know or understand. So I think it is willing to be vulnerable is a challenge. Not everybody likes that. Not everybody likes to say, actually, I don't know where to start. I don't know what information I don't know, and where do I go to get it? For me, the challenge has been knowing how important it is and knowing how far I have to go and how little time I have to be able to do that work. And also, I guess, trying not to beat myself up too much that I'm not in a place that I want to be, that I recognise this needs to be a journey, but it needs to be an active one. I think we've all said that maybe us as leaders within the department, being ably led by people like yourselves, have realised actually we don't have any more time to waste. We can't sit back on our privilege. We can't sit back on our ignorance. We need to actually make some active decisions. But how we do that in the light of everything else is a challenge, because there's so much learning to do. So I've been reading. I've really enjoyed my reading of the books that have been recommended to me. I found after a busy day at work, really working long hours like everyone has, was that the kind of book I wanted to read at night? But I found actually there was no other book I wanted to read, because I was being drawn into an environment where I needed to just learn more and more. There are times when I've had to put it down because it's been a bit overwhelming, and times where I go, no, actually, I need to really ramp this up and step it up in terms of my learning. So I think that's been my biggest challenge, is the amount of learning I need to do, recognizing that I don't have any more time to stop and not learn it. And so sort of factoring that into everything else is a challenge, but I think it's one that we have to take head on. It's not good enough that, like Paul's analogy of being in the queue, if we were looking at that for queuing for a piece of bread, why would I be at the front of the queue? I have no more right to that loaf of bread than anybody else. So why would I be at the front? And if that's the position that we're in now, then we need to step back and say, actually, no, it's not my position to be at the front, and we need to make some active change to it. So yeah, I guess time and the overwhelmingness and the guilt factor need to all be sort of reflected on and thought about to actually find a way forward and not be overwhelmed by it, because we can't. There is no need for us to be overwhelmed. We just need to work together to find the right solutions. So I say that, personally, and then I know professionally it is good to be in this virtual world with colleagues who are willing to step up and say actually they've got things to learn, that they are willing to look actively, and that together we can support each other in doing that, and hopefully make those changes, those really deep systemic changes that need to happen, will be best if we do it together than individually. So I'm pleased and privileged to be sat with all of you in this meeting, because we've got work to do.
Yes, Rachel, a collective, that's what we are, a collective of activists that want to make some change. And we can't do it on our own, it's too big. So we have to sort of collect as many people together to help us do it. And yeah, it's true. It brings up so many feelings because it's about race and racism, and it makes people feel uncomfortable. They don't want to talk about it. It's too uncomfortable. But being on a podcast the other day with some Black female occupational therapists, I love that one of them said, we have to be so uncomfortable that becomes comfortable, and then we can talk. And I thought that was a nice way of putting it. So thank you again for sharing.
Yeah,
that was really good to hear.
That sentiment of being comfortably uncomfortable is something that we need to encourage each other to be in that space. I think we need to be comfortably uncomfortable, and I have come to that point, and I'm sure my colleagues have as well, where they're sat here and they're going, sock it to me, I'm willing to be uncomfortable. It's not an easy space to be in, but neither has all the issues that have happened in the past. They are not easy, they are not kind, they are not fair, and so therefore if we need to experience some of that, then so be it, and rightly so.
Yeah, well said. Paul, that question to you.
Yeah, so thank you. So the question is, has it been challenging? Yes, is the is the answer. So what has been challenging? I think what I'd echo what Rachel has been saying, is that it has been, discussion actually has been quite uncomfortable, and I'm trying to think, well, why has that been? I think it's maybe because we've not, for example, in meetings that I've been attending, we've not openly discussed issues of race very much or at all previously. So maybe it's what you were saying is about it is uncomfortable, and I think partly it does arouse a lot of feelings and emotions, and that's part of the discomfort. I think terminology and language and what words we use, and there's uncertainty, and language changes over time, depends what context we're in, to what the purpose of the meeting is, what the purpose of the conversation is. But I think there's uncertainties about what terminology and language to use. There's fear about saying the wrong thing, offending people, but we do need to get that position where we are comfortable with talking about that, and we need to go through that period of discomfort. I think as well, one of the challenges for me, I think, is it is really, really complex, and it's very easy to say, yes, I'm an ally.
Anita, did you want to come in and comment before I move on to the other questions?
I just wanted to reflect on something Karen Middleton put on Twitter. And I think she made it very clear as a CEO that it's better to say something than nothing at all. And I think everybody in this room is trying to say something, and we may get it wrong. And I think that's absolutely okay to get things wrong. And I think what's come very clearly through the conversation is that allyship means about providing trust so that people can speak meaningfully about what an ally actually is, and also places of safety where people can talk. And I think what's really clear is BAME people don't want tokenism, we want meaningful change. And I think what's also very clear is finding out from the conversations that we've had with lots of students at LSBU is about my identity, who am I? So I may be wearing a Sikh turban, but actually I'm a South London boy at heart. So don't make presumptions about me. Don't think about this is my culture. My culture probably is a bit of South London, and I've also got my Sikh heritage as well. And I think being an ally is really understanding a person, their story, who am I, their experiences, and trying to get to know them as an individual and as a person. That may be difficult, particularly in the classroom setting, but somehow I think being an ally, you have to go deeper than just touching those very easy things like, and I'm going to use food as an example. Everybody does food, everybody does dress, those kind of things. And some of the issues we can't address, we can't solve, like some health inequalities, but we can think about ways of addressing them, or how they could be addressed, and how we can actually work as white allies with the BAME community, a bit like the lived experiences stories. I think there's a lovely one about a boxer on BBC Sport that I actually watched with my children, who actually talked about saying that nobody had actually said to him, you can do this, well done, you can become a boxer. Nobody had ever told him that. No teacher, no peer, no parents, anybody had told him that. So I think sometimes being an ally actually means giving people that additional encouragement. We kept talking about we keep talking about equality and equity, but sometimes we need to give people more to enable them to succeed. And I think that, for me, that's what an ally is actually about, is actually sometimes giving people additional support and help to get them to the place where they want to be, to the lecturer that they want to be, to the professor that they actually want to be. But I really think every single person here is courageous for addressing the elephant in the room. So, and that's not patronising at all. That's my thank you.
Thank you, Anita, and you're absolutely right. It is about equity. It's about that extra support to get people where they should be and have a right to be, and you need that. And it's equality is halfway, but equity is the right way, is the answer for, people having just the same as everybody else. So thank you for that. Are you ready for the next question? So the next question is, how have you been applying allyship? Can you share just one example? And shall we go to Paul first?
Thank you. Share one example. I mean, we've had this on the agenda within the team regularly to keep to, I think, as Anita was saying, and I hope this is what we're aiming towards, is to have that safe space where people can talk. And one of the things we've thought about is what levels can we actually take actions on. So there's the university, there's the school, there's the division, and there's individually what we can do. And some of those things take quite a long time to implement. Some things actually a bit quicker. And we were kind of we've been talking a bit about, well, if you just do something, are there smaller things that we can do, or is that just tokenism? I think there's a whole range. So what I'm going to share is one of the things we have been talking about is looking at the curriculum and the learning and teaching, and where does that come from? And so I lead a module on evidence-based practice and occupational therapy. And so I've actually been thinking, which has started this semester, and I've been thinking much more carefully about how do I explicitly include questions of race, equity and diversity within that. So we've had some quite interesting discussions raised around evidence-based practice in terms of who funds research, where does it come from, who are the participants in research, who actually gets to participate, and this idea of people that's hard to reach, or in fact maybe people that are easy to forget. And so I've been more conscious about bringing those questions into the classroom. I think one of the great strengths of the student body at LSBU is that we do have a diverse group of students, and we do need to encourage and promote the identity of all the students and the sense of belonging, that they are part of all of the teaching and learning. And it's been a little bit of a shift on this module from imparting knowledge as the expert to students, which can take over the process of teaching and learning, and maybe encouraging more than I have previously students to bring their own knowledge and experiences to those discussions, and valuing and being very clear to value the contributions of the students.
Thank you, Paul. So it sounds like a little bit of a journey for yourself as well, in how you're.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where you think, have I been doing this previously? And I have partly, but not quite as explicitly. And I think that's one of the things that's different more recently, is actually being much more explicit about what you're doing and what you're saying and why. Yeah, and it'd be worth to also maybe reflect on why you didn't do it as well, as much as you wanted to. What was stopping you, really? Yeah, and I think it's one of those areas of teaching where it hadn't come across as immediately to me. I hadn't thought about the relevance of it as compared with other areas of the curriculum where issues of race and culture are much more obviously relevant. Interesting. Thank you, Paul, for that little extra question answering. So I might come to you last then, Rachel, but I'll go to Claire first and then come to you, Rachel.
Yeah, so an example, I hoped it was an example of allyship, but we've got two examples from my division. So last year, Noreen sent round a journal article about digital poverty among BAME students. So our part in our division, I'm sorry, one of my dogs is asking for their dinner. I'm sorry, go down. Huge apologies. So what was important to me is to make sure that our students got their iPads and whatever it was that we were doing at London South Bank to ensure that they had access to the technology that they needed. And that kind of went across the it wasn't a division at that time, it was across the programs that I was involved in and running. And it shocked me, actually. It was something that I wasn't aware of, the amount of digital poverty within BAME student communities. And so this year I was very determined that they have access to the digital kits that they need, and we've slightly changed how we do it at London South Bank now, but it was a real focus on making sure that all of the students, but particularly those within the BAME communities, had that access to the digital the digital kit. But what also struck me, again, before we were a division, was how many students, almost all of the students in the sport rehab programme within my division are from the BAME community. And so when I say we lost a lot of students, we had a bit of attrition to get some sense of, I'm white, the teaching team are white. You know, is there something we weren't doing that would be supportive of the students? And most of the students that we lost were male as well. And so that's kind of a piece of ongoing work that that we're looking at in why did we lose so many of those students. And it's multifactorial, like most of these things are, but it's looking at our programs and how we can plug that gap and stop us losing students who embark on a degree. And then what happens to them? You know, why do they not? Why is there something that I'm missing as a now head of division? Is it something that the teaching team are missing because we're all white? We don't have the lived experience of our students. So that I felt was an example of allyship, but it is a work in progress. I don't know the answers to it all yet. I'm not sure I ever will, because everybody's individual circumstance is different. But I am beginning to understand the different strains and stresses on our BAME students, and wherever we discover there's something that we can make a difference to, then we're gradually making those differences where we can. Much work to be done, to be honest with you.
Yes, it is a long haul kind of work, and we know that. And you know, we may all retire and disappear, and it'll still be carrying on the work. But
some of us are closer to that than you, Miss.
That's what you think. But what I was thinking of when you said that, actually, Claire, I went to another webinar, and it had Marmot in it, and he said very clearly that what COVID-19 is showing up in education is the big difference in digital poverty, the big impact, of digital poverty, I can't say that word, digital poverty, and how it is affecting people from the global majority, the population from the global majority. And it is going to create down the pipeline such a long-term effects that we need to start working on it right now, and you've started doing that already. And also the fact that university is bringing in record numbers of students from the global majority, but they're not exiting at the same number. So what's happening in the middle? And this is across universities. So yes, work needs to be done in finding out what's happening at the education level. And the thing is, one of the problems identified is about equity. So we have standard processes and procedures within university, and we tie ourselves to that we don't think about how do we create equity in these standard processes, because one of the things it's not doing is providing equity, because you've said it, Claire, people are individual. Sorry, my tongue is rumbling now. People are individual, and yet we have to follow standard procedures and processes. And if we deviate from that, then what happens? You know, we're told, go back to those standards. They're the ones that you should follow. So we can't create equity when we have such rigid systems to play with. But yeah, that's interesting, actually. Rachel, over to you.
Okay, lots to hear and consider there. I think we alluded, and we've spoken a little bit about it, about strategy, and how do I then, as a sort of overarching lead of this, bring this together. And I think that's one of the areas that I really need to focus on. Where I have started and actually done some activity, so there's sort of been some positive moves, is we had AHP Day last week, and I really felt we've talked about the gap. So we've got a lot of communities coming into LSBU, and that's one of our USPs. It's one of the reasons why, like Claire, it's a fantastic place to work, because there is so much diversity and a richness of that, but we are not reflecting that in our academic teams. So the students come in, they can see that cultural diversity in their cohorts and their colleagues and their peers there. They look at their teaching team that's all white, and we're not really clear what they're seeing in the workplace, in the professional workplace, because I don't know fully enough. I've left the NHS clinical practice a while ago. What does that look like for students when they go out to their placements or their clinical practice, their practice learning? And it's probably a real mixed bag. So they're getting all these different experiences throughout, but where it's really clear that it's not equitable is in that academic framework, in the teaching environment is very white. So what I wanted to do for AHP Day was to just, for our current first years and our incoming students, was to, as Anita sort of referenced with her example, is for those students to aim high, to actually see that there are people like them, there are places to go, and that's where we want you, and that we need to get you there, and sort of make that statement. And I linked with South Bank UTC, University Technical College, and tweeted everything directly to them. And I've had a thank you to say, that was really great. It was really great to share with our students. So it's sort of starting at the beginning of the supply, looking at the fact that we have a gap in the middle, supporting them on placement, but how do we get that equity back in the teaching team so that we're not always struggling with the fact that we have a mixed community of students facing white academics on the whole, and then we're not attracting them back into the system. So there's a lot of work and thinking to do about encouraging students to reach their potential, to go on in their professional careers, but also why don't we see the level playing field back in academia as well? So that's one area that I really want to have continued work on. That picks up the attainment gap and how that works as well. And this week I've been working with one of the senior execs on a project on the attainment gap and how we can be connected in as allied health, and have recommended one of our Black colleagues to go on to that project group, and she was delighted. So I think it's making those positive moves towards that and how we can support that. I can do that in my role, and linking with everyone else's colleagues to think of strategies and ways forward. And yes, we do need to meet to have a strategy meeting about pulling all these strands together.
Sounds good to me, Rachel. Sounds good. Shall we go on to the last question? Are you ready, panel? And it's about strategy, Rachel. What would you like to do strategically with your allyship power in the next few months? And I think, Rachel, you kind of sort of answered that really. But shall I go to Claire and ask you that question first?
What I would love, when I look around the university, I see and the student population, huge numbers of BAME community. When I look around the university, and for as long as I've known Rachel, I've said this to her, so she won't be surprised at me saying this again. If I look around the university and I see members of the BAME community in cleaning jobs and security jobs and catering jobs, and I look around the academic team and I don't see very many members of the BAME community on the academic team. So if I could wave my magic wand, I don't think I'll achieve this in the next few months, but hopefully when I graduate a few students from the programs on my division, hopefully we can tempt them back into academia. But if I could wave my magic wand, I would have a more diverse academic staff team. That would be, I think it's, whilst it was lovely of my two students that from the BAME community who saw my job and said they wanted a job similar with their careers, I think that's fantastic. But actually I think it's of more benefit to have see me be me, and the more that we have a diverse teaching team, the more that students will be able to say, I can do that, why can I not do that? And so if I was to put that strategy in place over the next few months and I could change that quickly, that would be where I would see things going.
Wow.
It's my shortest answer all night, isn't it?
That's I guess a big aspiration, but one that we should be dreaming of. Do you know what I mean? And to make it real, So it needs to be voiced and it needs to be acted upon. So thank you, Claire. Gail.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just unmuting myself there. Yeah, I mean, I think, much like, I said right at the beginning, and Claire has just reiterated there, you look around the office and, it's not representative of our student body. It's not representative of our overall university community. It's not representative of the overall staff when you look at, all of the different job roles that there are. So yes, I mean, it would be great, and I think it's essential that that is addressed, and that kind of we need kind of more people from the BAME community on the teaching staff, on the academic teams, and that allows there to be more equity for students to be able to relate. I mean, we're already doing things like trying to make sure that students coming in for interviews and things, we try to have someone kind of a BAME person on interview panels and things like that, to make them kind of to recognize that we want equity, we want kind of our student body to be diverse, but we're not demonstrating that within the teams. And so yes, I think that is a big thing that does need to be addressed. We need to make sure that kind of we recognize any unconscious beliefs and that may impact actions, whether it's recruitment or teaching or any other kind of area of our work. And we need to consciously unlearn biases and prejudices. We need to make it kind of the classroom a safe space for the students, where they feel that they can be themselves, where they can develop, where they can progress. But if we're not representative of them, then that makes that job harder. So yes, I mean, it would be, if you want to give us some more staff, Rachel, that would be great. But at the minute, what we've got isn't representative of our students, and I think that is a big challenge, and it does need to be addressed. There's lots of smaller things that we can do, kind of you work with what you've got, to some degree, kind of amongst, kind of your existing staff and, all the stuff that you do in delivering your curriculums. But yeah, we want to do more. We want to make sure that, kind of we give what, more and what there should be, and we're more representative of our students.
Thank you, Gail. For me, it was that we want to do more. That's really important. And also, one of the things I picked up was, did you say you're trying to have representation in interviews and things like that? Is that what you're saying? Yeah. That's interesting, because I was reading a little paper that was saying that was it a book that was saying that one of the things we have to do is support the person from the global majority population in the interview team, because they will feel the pressure of their white colleagues, and they may start to behave just as their white colleagues because they want to perform. So we have to be very careful of supporting our BAME colleagues or colleagues from the global majority populations to not feel that they have to go into those behaviors that you're exactly trying to avoid. So it's worth being cognizant of that. And I didn't really think about that until I started sort of hearing that. And it was something that there's a saying, right? Not all your skin folk are your kinfolk, and that can happen very quickly in situations where people from the global majority are put into positions because people are trying to do the right thing, but actually they start to behave in the ways that we don't want them to. So we have to think about that as well. Yeah. I forgot now who. Have you spoken already about this, Paul?
I think it's me.
Yeah, thank you. I've lost where I'm going now.
Thank you. So what would I like to do strategically with Allyship Power in the next few months? I think, well, it's the next few months, it's the next years. I think there's some things that are short term on there, and there's some things that we'll be on a long term process here. So I guess as head of division, my power, or what I should be doing, is making sure that this conversation continues within the team, that it's in the agenda, that we're looking at, working at multiple different levels. And I think back to what we were talking about earlier, it is about actions, isn't it? It's not about passively being an ally, it's about actively, proactively trying to work towards equity and improving things. So yeah, I think staff recruitment is definitely something to work on. I mean, other areas that particularly interest me is this idea of decolonization of the curriculum, and there is work going on with that. I think as we move towards revalidation, that's something definitely that will be a topic of interest and discussion moving forward over the next few months. I'm really interested in the attainment gap as well, because it's there, but I don't think we really know what exactly the attainment gap is in detail. I don't think we have the nuanced data on that. I think we need to really investigate that a lot more. There's been some discussion within occupational therapy courses that there may be particular academic areas that students from BAME backgrounds do less well on, for example, anatomy and physiology. And I've been talking with Anita about potentially looking at a project with some other universities around exploring that, which looks really, really interesting. Another thing, a bit of a plug as well, we've got as part of Occupational Therapy Week in November, we are having a facilitated conversation around occupational therapy theory and models of practice, and are they fit for purpose for people from diverse backgrounds. And one thing I would like to do is see if we can develop that into something a bit bigger, a series potentially of events, but starting off in Occupational Therapy Week. So yeah, lots of potential ideas, but I think really focusing on actions and things that we can do.
Oh yeah. So yeah, again, I'm just like, because I didn't know, but it just sounds like there's lots of things going on, and I'd love to just shout out and showcase it all, really, because there's lots of good things going on that we're trying to do as a divisions in the department. Yeah, Rachel, do you want to say some last words, and then I'm going to go to Anita for our little summary.
The pressure, Mish. Yeah, and I think there is, and certainly prompted by the good work that you and Anita have been doing and the climate that we're in, you've now got the three heads of division and me as their sort of direct line manager, I guess, in the space where we need to be to start to make the positive action. And so how do we capitalise on that? And I think we're in a good space to be able to do that, but we need to really work together on that strategy and how we're going to bring it all together so that we can shout about it, because I think sometimes things can go under the radar and get missed because we don't really know what's going on, and that happens in lots of walks of life. So let's try and bring all this together. So that would be strategically where I want to use my influence, is to work with the heads of division and yourselves to say, okay, we're doing this, this and this, let's pull it together in something meaningful that we can then start to share more widely with our colleagues. We've started it. Sometimes it's good just to get going, and I feel that that's been my role particularly, is to be able to support you to go. I now need to pull you all together and say, let's shape it, but let's just go and not wait for any more hurdles, and let's just get going. So that, I guess, where I would like to continue is to be the support and the enabler, and to do some actions as well myself, so not just always in the support role but in the active role, to make sure that we have that meaningful strategy that these heads of division and myself and others can get their hands dirty and get working on.
Sounds like let's go. Anita, do you want to have some last words?
I think this is going to sound very radical here. And I think one of the things about allyship is about power. And in this room, we've got 4 very powerful people that are gatekeepers to enabling the dream to become a reality. For me, it starts on access to education. And I think for me, it's also about putting where resources are actually needed, about role models, about young people being told about the AHP professions. It means outreach work, and it means enabling people to have an equal chance of actually becoming an AHP and not finding out about it 10 years down the line or 20 years down the line. So for me, the journey begins in 16 to 18-year-olds in many ways. And I think for me, if we're going to become a community university and we really are going to practice what we preach, it means really working with other people that we've never worked with before, like teachers, communities, shouting out loud and proud that we're AHPs, that we're London South Bank, and this is what we represent. We represent fairness, trustworthiness, and we're going to use our power, which heads of division have got and which deans have got, to facilitate the dream, really. And for me, it's so nice to hear people in power actually willing to support the initiative. But my only word to caution is this: is that it's going to take money as well. We're going to need resources to do this as well. We're going to need to work not only as a team and have a strategy, but all good things cost money as well. So, and that's just a word of caution. We know women of colour do most of the work. We know how hard we've both been working on this. And that's a fact. That's a fact. But I'm really proud to be part of London South Bank. I think, as we all are, and I'm really proud that we're on this journey together. And I'm really proud that we're allied health care practitioners as well. I'm really proud that we're all working together on it. And I'm really proud of the university for enabling us to do the work.
Thank you, Anita. That's a good, strong ending. Proud to be LSBU. I've got a little, like a good educator, I've got just a quick little PowerPoint, not to talk about it. I just want to really share some of the allyship frameworks that I've collected as I've learned and been learning, and I'd like to share that, and also because I want it to be on the recording as well, so people can go back to it if they want to. Is that okay if you stay with me just a wee bit longer? Okay, so this is that sharing thing that I'm never too good at. Okay. So let me just, first I have a plug, which is we have got on the 12th of November, we have got episode 3 of our LSBU BAME Academics in Conversation series. It's a free event, which we would like everyone to come to. And if you're interested, please contact events at lsbu.ac.uk. That's 12th of November 2020 at 6 o'clock. And the title of the free event is Black Students' Experiences in Higher Education, Real World Problems and Solutions. So everybody's welcome. So the next few slides, I've just got frameworks, so I'm just going to quickly go through those. I'm not going to say much about them, just for you to see, and hopefully it will be helpful. So we've been talking about Anne Bishop quite a lot, and this is her 5-step framework. And I think everything we've talked about tonight in our webinar is exactly this. This is where we're trying to go and become. And that's the book, just in case you wanted to know where it came from. Yeah, if you're interested in allyship, I think this is the book to go to first. Yes, so this is Yvonne Coughlin, recently retired Res Director, and she developed the 7 A's of Authentic Allyship, which is also been quite popular and being used quite a lot. it's an accessible framework. And this is by well-known, again, educational campaigner, Gurnam Singh, and his framework from going from white supremacy, that's the power of the white person, of the white population, to white allyship. And again, this one is a popular framework that is seen and discussed as well. This one was developed by Sussex Community, who were doing lots of great things. They've got a COVID-19 set up a COVID-19 clinic specifically for people from the global majority populations, which is the first of its kind. And they're trying to do lots of innovative things around helping the communities from the global majority populations. And they've developed this one, doing white allyship. And then this one I recently saw on Twitter from the Leeds Teaching Hospital, which the acronym is I Applaud. And this is their allyship framework. Again, I think the themes go through all the resemble quite a few of the others as well. And the Wheel of Power and Privilege was another one that's doing the rounds on Twitter, and got a lot of reception, and I thought it was really interesting, so I wanted to share it. And I want to end with Amélie Lamont's little infographic about being an ally, and she's written here: to be an ally is to take on the struggle as your own, transfer the benefits of your privilege to those who don't have, amplify voices of the oppressed before your own, acknowledge that even though you feel pain, the conversation is not about you, stand up even when you feel scared, own your mistakes and decenter yourself, understand that your education is up to you and no one else. So that is the end of our talk. So thank you very much. Thank you for your time.